The emerging Orthodox coaching movement. Well, hey, gang, welcome to another episode. And sadly, today, my faithful co partner in this podcast, Kim Avery, cannot be with us. I will be interviewing two gentlemen who are leading a worldwide movement in the Orthodox Church of integration of coaching in all aspects of ministry as well as in the public sector, any who identify with the Orthodox faith. So, a very exciting development here. If I can wind back the clock for us, about 4 or 5 years ago, Kim and I interviewed Lisa Mladinich about the emerging Catholic coaching movement. In these two expressions of the Christian faith with such ancient history and such hierarchical structure, the movement of coaching has been a little bit slower than in many Protestant denominations. However, once it catches fire, the impact is rather dramatic. And we have seen over these last 5 years that initial introduction in the Catholic world of coaching has absolutely caught fire. In fact, now every year here at the Institute, we teach 2 private offerings of our introductory course, The Essentials of Life Coaching, just for Catholic audiences. Now, once they have come in there, then they're integrated throughout the entire Institute, of course. But it's a beautiful opportunity to have your culture and your language, as it were, communicated more naturally in kind of the space that you feel most familiar and comfortable immediately. That is exactly what's happening now with the Orthodox Church, and that's what we're going to be exploring today. Let me introduce to you, first of all, Father Ian Pac-Urar. Father Ian got his start in media and communications. He was managing a small radio station up in Ontario, Canada, and he ultimately became president of Media Corporation. After moving from Canada to Ohio in the U.S., he built a career teaching and training educators and private sector professionals. And then in midlife, he got called to serve the church. He directed continuing education for clergy and lay leaders in the Orthodox Church. He presided over the ecclesiastical court system, and he founded the Synergia Group in 2012, all while keeping an active parish ministry. After 34 years as a priest in the Romanian Episcopate of the Orthodox Church in America, Father Ian is now president of the Orthodox Christian Leadership Initiative. We're going to tell you more about that on this interview. It is a nonprofit providing coaching and training to clergy and lay leaders across Orthodox jurisdictions in the U.S. and Canada. Very, very exciting to have someone on the cutting edge like that with us today. And likewise, my other guest today is the Reverend David Limiero. He has served as a local church pastor for more than 27 years. He started Life Journey Christian Church in Bakersfield, California, back in 2003 after having established several other churches, and he was instrumental in starting 2 other congregations in Bakersfield, California over that next decade, one of them English-speaking, one of them Spanish-speaking. In 2007, David joined the staff at Stadia. That is an international church planting mission. And he served there until 2021. During his time at Stadia, he was involved in supporting, get this, 1,500 church plants in 23 countries and 46 U.S. states, leading the pastoral care and information technology teams. In 2018, David and his wife Jan co-founded Eagle's Rest, that provides sabbatical care and coaching to cross-cultural and local ministry leaders. And for the last 3 years, he has spearheaded a leadership training and coaching program with Orthodox clergy. In fact, 31 priests so far have either graduated from that 2-year program or are currently involved. He's receiving strong support for that ministry. It is actually approved by the Holy Eparchial Synod of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America. Once again, just tremendously amazing to me to see gentlemen like these spearheading a movement like this in the Orthodox Church. So, to both of you, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Chris. It's good to be here.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to be part of the podcast today.
Well, before we dive into this exciting movement in the Orthodox Church, I think let's let our listeners know a little bit more about you each individually. Father Ian, I'll start with you. What is it that first drew you, with all of the other roles you were already playing, into this field of professional grade coaching? What was the attraction?
Well, Chris, my life, even before I was ordained a priest, was about how it is that people change, how people are successful at making changes in their lives making decisions at pivotal points in their lives, adopting new techniques. In I was originally interested in this in the field of teaching, and so I took a doctorate in organizational change and staff development, and I learned all about presenting programs, and I learned all about how adults change and how you overcome resistance to change and systems theories and all of those sorts of things. And I spent a good portion of my life telling people things, teaching them content, teaching them about things like active listening, sort of oxymoronic that I spent so many years telling people not to tell other people things. But so it just struck me as I saw my brothers struggling and as I reflected on my own struggles over 34 years, that there were really times when my father confessors were wonderful, my mentors were wonderful, but there were really times when I just didn't need somebody to tell me what to do. I needed somebody to hear me and to walk with me. But at the base of our presumptions about coaching, we believe that a person who is being coached is already achieving success and already has wonderful ideas and just needs some time and someone to walk with them so that they can achieve clarity and purpose and conviction as to what they're going to do next or where they are now. So those kinds of needs became apparent to me over the years, and I never really knew what model there was except a pseudo-therapy model, using what little bits of counseling practice I had learned about and all of that. But when I encountered coaching, and especially ICF coaching, the International Coaching Federation, and its approach to coaching, as the saying goes, suddenly everything became clear.
I'm glad you said that. And I love that you made the point of emphasizing that all the forms of people helping that we are also very used to and comfortable with and actually serve their place very well. They tend to be more outside in, that telling that you were talking about. And coaching is so different because it seeks to reach inside and call out that which is inside there for the person themselves to be actually able to hear more clearly and figure out, well, what do I need to do with that? What does that tell me about discernment for the next season and such? Beautiful. David, let me put the same question to you. With your background in church ministry and establishing churches, international impact like you have had, in fact, you're a man of many interests. What specifically was it that drew you to the field of professional grade coaching?
So way back in 2003, when our family and I packed up the moving van and our three kids, and we drove from Chicago to Bakersfield, California, I was leaving behind a board of elders and a budget and a building and a staff and moving out with just a couple of families from Illinois, a couple waiting in California to start a church from scratch. And Stadia, the church planting organization, gave us, each of us church planters, a coach and a mentor, and distinguished a little bit that the mentor was the person who's ahead of you, kind of lead by example, things like that. And a coach was more of a come alongside leader. Now, this was not ICF coaching, but there I was. I think Father Ian hit on it, this feeling of aloneness. I've got this launch team we're trying to form, trying to raise money, trying to do the work of outreach, and form a congregation, as my Orthodox friends call it, a mission parish, and just needing somebody available to help me. And what I pretty quickly found is I was not the only one feeling alone. And so started meeting with similar church planters in our region, getting together, coaching one another. And it was just a few years later that I joined the team at Stadia and began to oversee the team that provided the coaches to these church planters. And so read lots of books about coaching, practice coaching, but it wasn't until 2023 that I started my ICF journey and really began to say, this is something that deserves my bigger attention and getting better at the craft by going through a program like PCCI. In fact, it wasn't like PCCI, it was PCCI. I enrolled in Essentials class back in February of 2023. I had been coaching at that point professionally since August of 21. I left Stadia and started a coaching company in 2022 and was coaching small business leaders as well as some nonprofit leaders with Michael Hyatt, who, as many of our listeners will know here, is a deacon in the Orthodox Church. And that was actually where I made my first connection to His Eminence Metropolitan Nathaniel and multiple other priests from the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese, and began to coach them. That was all in by 2023. So starting the ICF journey, my first relational connection with the Orthodox faith.
Both of your stories are actually pretty amazing. That was very condensed for both of you. I know we could spend the entire podcast actually just unpacking a little bit more about the significance of so much foundational material. I think for listeners who may not be familiar with the ICF, maybe this is the first time that they identifying with the Orthodox Church, and so listening to this podcast, but trying to figure out what is coaching, they may not be tracking with us in terms of the distinctions that we're making here. So I think we probably better unpack that a little bit more before we proceed into some of the applications that you are both seeing within the church. Many times my experience has been, it doesn't matter what the denomination is, when people hear about coaching, their concept of coaching is kind of like what you referred to, Father, like a sports analogy. Oh, somebody standing on the sidelines and hollering out instructions or guidance or motivation, rah-rah, cheerleading kind of stuff, or getting in our faces when we're privately working on something. But it's definitely an outside-in kind of a motivating and get focused kind of a role, and that is decidedly not the approach to professional grade coaching like we're talking about here. In fact, that whole metaphor kind of needs to be relegated out of the brain somewhere, because what we are talking about, you've both used the phrase "come alongside" or an alongside person. This is someone who is like a disembodied voice in our ear that is not telling, not directing, not guiding, not counseling, not mentoring, not advising, all of those outside in things. That's not what we're hearing. That little disembodied voice is kind of an invisible person, as it were, who is asking the questions that are begging to be asked and encouraging us to stay in that state of questioning. I so oftentimes think of, many fathers of the faith, but St. Francis of Assisi, who are you, Lord, and who am I? Who are you, and who am I? That staying in questions that the Lord delights then in opening up more understanding through. So David, let me toss this back to you first. You have actually gone all the way through your training from 2023 to here we're just interviewing in 2026. You have the professional certified coach designation. That means you hit the ground running and haven't stopped in pursuing certification. What have you found to be some of the misconceptions or hesitancies within the church with regard to coaching?
It's interesting. Hesitancies from within the church, I really haven't found very much. Partly, I think, in part because this distinction of what coaching is and what coaching is not may not be entirely clear. I think that it has really been the process of building relationships of trust with individual priests that has come through this act of coaching that opens the door for more coaching. And one of my favorite definitions of coaching, Chris, comes from you, which is a facilitated monologue. That it is a space for a leader who has ideas, needs a place to process, needs a place to do it safely. Maybe they've got a great idea and they want to freak out their leadership team because it's too early. Or they may discover in the facilitated monologue that's a terrible idea and they don't want to pursue it.
Mhm.
And so I think just the trust that's been built over relational conversations. And then as priests that we've worked with over a period of years have really begun to understand what coaching is. It just as it did with me, inspired an interest in getting credentialed, getting some education, so that they can hone their craft. Because much of what they're doing in parish ministry has a close resemblance to coaching, but they're doing it without the advantage of some skills and some practice and things that they can do through someplace like PCCI.
That's great. I love hearing that you've not actually experienced a whole lot of miscommunication or misconceptions about it, or certainly resistance to it once it's been clearly explained. I'm glad too you put in there the little phrase I coined years ago of a facilitated monologue. We're definitely not dialoguing with clients when we're coaching with them. It's not back and forth so much. There is a back and forth, but 80+% of the quote conversation is just the client themselves or the person themselves, the parishioner themselves, exploring and being genuinely curious and staying in that space. And our role as the coach is that facilitator, just continually prompting, "Ooh, wait a minute, say more about that. Oh, what would that look like? Do you know anybody else who's ever done that kind of thing? What was the impact there? How does this honor your higher values?" Those kinds of exploratory questions are what we're facilitating. Father Ian, I'm going to toss this to you to say as well, because you have pursued through the associate certified coach, and I know you're continuing your certification as well. I would have imagined in the hierarchical structure of the Orthodox Church that more telling or top-down teaching, advising, preaching, guiding, all those things that we look to the church to provide for us would be what people assume coaching is. It's just the new hot word for what we've always done before in people helping. Have you encountered any kind of misconceptions or hesitancies in the church in introducing professional grade coaching?
Well, it's I was just listening to David speak and thinking that it's significant, that the those who have encountered coaching and have had experience with it become very positive about it. And David is blessed to be working with those people. The people who haven't come to it may or may not be as positive about it. And with any new technology, and I'm calling coaching a technology in a loose sort of soft way, but with any new technology that comes into the church, there's a question of what's this all about and what's it trying to replace that we already have. And so when I say to a priest or even to a parishioner, a coach isn't going to tell you anything. The coach is just going to ask you questions and listen to you talk. A lot of times the response is, well, what good is that? I'm going to pay money for that, and or I'm going to bless my priest to do that. That, but the thing about coaching, right, is the nature of the questions that get asked by the coach, by a professional grade coach, as you say, and someone who's really trained in the ICF model, so that by asking these powerful questions and listening to the responses and asking the next question and just moving that it's Socrates on steroids. Just keep asking and asking and asking. And I am still amazed at what happens in the coaching encounter for my own clients. Many times it's like, well, this conversation's gone on a long time, and then all of a sudden, oh, I never thought of that before. Oh, and then you say, well, how was this hour? Was it worth? Well, yeah, it was worth it. Look at what I figured out all by myself. It's really wonderful. Okay, so what good is it? But the other question is, what's the philosophy behind it that is going to threaten my orthodoxy? Is this some kind of disguised secular attack on confession and spiritual direction and spiritual fatherhood and the authority of the church and obedience and all of those things? And it's the folks who step forward and encounter coaching that discover that it's not any of those things. In fact, properly used, properly carried out by a coach, by a trained professional grade coach, all of those things become more powerful experiences for the person who is the beneficiary of them. All of these kinds of things that we do in the church that are sacramental, that are spiritual exercises, that are spiritual encounters and interactions, are really augmented when the father or the director or whoever it is, the coach, is using those skills. Whether they're a certificated coach or not, the skills are what bring the quality to the experience.
I'm so glad you made some things clear there, and I'm glad that there was some of that confusion or hesitancy, and I especially appreciate that you addressed the concerns that this might in some way usurp or seek to replace or undermine the ministry of the church. I think it's very important, listeners, that you're hearing that coaching, as we're trying to explore and expand an understanding of it here, is not better than, nor is it replacing any other people helping kind of a role that we and the church are responsible to play. It is, in fact, though, a different utilization of self, a different way of interacting that is very conscious and intentional because of its exploratory nature. I oftentimes liken it much more to a detective who's coming on a crime scene. Everybody standing at a crime scene would love it if somebody could come up and just tell us immediately, oh, I know who did this and I know why and I know how they did it. But that's not the role of the detective. The role of the detective is to come with questions and to know, okay, if I'm seeing this, then it might be this or this or this. So we're going to begin exploring here. Cordon off these areas. We're looking for these kind of things. Let me know if you find this. They're just exploring. And son of a gun, the more they do, eventually we know who did it and why and how. The answers present themselves. They did not come from outside in with a quote expert. They were instead discerned or unearthed or revealed, unveiled by a person skilled in a certain way of using self and staying in question, staying genuinely curious. That is much closer to what coaching is bringing when it's integrated into our Christian faith. It certainly doesn't replace nor undercut anything. In fact, let's ground this in Scripture. One of the many verses we oftentimes cite here needs to be put forth, and that is from Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 5. It simply says, "The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has understanding draws them out." That really speaks to the individuality, I think, of each of us. We're all called to the faith, and there are certain tenets of our faith that we all must follow, and a moral code, and all the rest of what constitutes being a Christian and living the Christian life. That is universal. You don't need to question if the scriptures address it and the church teaches it. That's where we need to be in alignment with. But it's that individuality, the purposes of a person's heart, those things that God has uniquely written into the fiber of each and every one of our beings. Those are the deep waters that coaching seeks to draw out from the client through this questions-based, staying in the questions, facilitated monologue kind of a process here. Father Ian, you used a phrase a moment ago that I was just riffing off of. So many times, all of us can count when we were having a conversation with somebody, and maybe they knew they were a coach, and maybe they just happened to be using coaching questions, but we heard ourselves stumble out with a, whoa, I needed to hear myself say that. Right? Right? What do we mean? Well, it came from inside of me, but I needed to hear myself say that. Because when I did, it put into words and in the context of everything I understand, all that I am, something that resonates with such truth for me. Suddenly the mist is blown away and things are clearer for my path ahead or what I need to do next or that kind of thing. That again is what coaching is bringing when we take this professional training toward it. So let's build upon this now that we've got everybody kind of singing out of the same songbook here, right? The International Coaching Federation talks a lot about the importance of coaching presence. It's one of our foundational competencies, those 8 core competencies of ICF-aligned coaching. Coaching presence. And I know in the Orthodox Church there is a history of really emphasizing contemplative listening, contemplating, sacred curiosity, the process and importance of discernment. David, let me toss this back to you first, but I'd like both of you to comment on it. Where do you see coaching as we're exploring it here, lining up with what the church for 2,000 years has taught as being so central to the life of the committed Christian?
It's a great question, Chris. I think that the biggest thing that I have seen is the distinction between what is believed and what's practiced. And I don't say that in any kind of judgmental way, but I find this in my own Protestant world that I know the kind of contemplation that is helpful to me. I know the things that I should be doing contemplatively. And of course, Orthodoxy has a fabulously rich tradition of contemplation and, the richness not just of the scriptures, but of the fathers. But typically with the priests that I'm working with, what happens is life crowds that out. They're priests with a presbytera and children and a parish, and things are growing, and there's busyness that just comes being a part of culture here in North America and the United States. And so it's not as if those practices are unknown, but sometimes they are not practiced because we get caught up in the whirlwind of life. And so often when I'm coaching, and I'll even ask a question just like you did, well, what does, the capital T tradition say might be a good way to move forward here? And someone will say, I need to make sure that I'm doing the morning prayers every day. Or, this is something I really should need to bring to my spiritual father. And I'll ask, when was the last time you talked to your spiritual father? Well, it's been too long. And so again, I don't think that this is unique to Orthodoxy. I think it's part of the chaotic world we live in, always on attention economy, cell phones, and especially in the Orthodox Church now, there's such an influx of catechumens and inquirers coming in that the priests who might have even been to handle a parish 5 years ago are seeing, 5, 10 times as many inquirers and catechumens coming in. So the pressure's growing greater, and coaching can be a reminder just to go back to the things that you already know the faith teaches and that you perhaps used to practice on a less busy day and can easily come back to.
Very well said. Yeah. So many times it's not some new revelatory aha that we never knew, but instead it's calling back to the things that we know but struggle to practice, to integrate into the living out of our lives. Father Ian, let me toss the same question to you. And I wonder if you could also expand some of this, the applications of coaching for any Christian. We've been speaking here a lot about the Orthodox Church and the clergy embracing this movement. But today we're actually speaking to anyone of the Orthodox faith, clergy or laity, and in fact, maybe even mostly laity, those who are in all kinds of positions of influence and leadership and responsibility in the world. Uh, Talk about some of the applications of coaching for any of us in living out this Christian life.
Wow, that's that's a great question, and it's an important question. Really, it's central. Why are we doing this if not to live better lives, if not to help each other live better lives in Christ? It's it's also a dangerous question because we can easily be tempted to spiritualize things, where or unnecessarily or immoderately. Gaining the skills of a coach has helped me, for instance, to when I encounter another human being, whether it's a parishioner or whether it's my wife, or whether it's a clerk in the store, to come to that encounter with the wonder and the awe that I am participating in something here that is divine, that my life is holy, and that this thing that I'm encountering, this other person, this landscape, that all of it is holy. And we do forget um, that we see the image of Christ in the other, and that we follow that model of Christ who asked so many questions, in the scriptures. Like, Chris, you've talked about this many times, and you even have the number down. I can never remember the number, but so many more questions than outright statements, beginning with the great, who do you say I am? Being trained as a coach, having gained these skills, doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be a spiritual director or that it's limited to clergy or any of that. It's for anyone really who, in the course of their life, comes into contact with other human beings with whom they have the kinds of interactions where each of us can grow and where we can, help that other person grow. The great ahas, as you say, sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't, right in the moment. And sometimes the aha is, oh yeah, I forgot I knew that.
So many different applications, and I know we could actually spend a different interview entirely looking at all the different ways that a coach approach can be taken to not just leadership or positions of influence in laity and clergy, but in all areas of life and our own self-leadership, right? A coach approach to our health care, our maintenance of our health, our handling of our finances, our parenting, our marriages, whatever it might be that God's going to call us to account for. Then an exploratory coaching approach to that is a tremendous use of this really emerging field and the emerging movement within the Orthodox Church. In the interest of time for today, I'm going to put this to both of you gentlemen. Father Ian, you first. If someone is listening here and is curious about learning more, what would you suggest as some initial steps for them, maybe specifically with the Orthodox Christian Leadership Initiative?
Yeah, well, I would give him the advice Philip gave to Nathaniel, when he said, "Can anything come out of Galilee?" And Philip said, "Well, come and see." And so you can certainly come and see us at Orthodox Coaching, all one word. The beauty of the internet was get to cram all these words together. orthodoxcoaching.net. And you can visit our website. You can learn a little bit more about what we do, about coaching, and who we are at the Orthodox Christian Leadership Initiative, Orthodox Christian Coaching. And there's a contact form there, and we will get back to you right away.
If someone in church leadership is cautiously curious, but they want to kind of do more than just kick the tires, suggestion.
Sure, Chris. For clergy, our website, edensviewcoaching.com/orthodox. That's Edens, like the Garden of Eden with an S on the end, edensviewcoaching.com/orthodox. We actually have an alumni page, which has the 31 folks who've either graduated or are in the program. And we just invite people, if you're clergy, you might know somebody from seminary or from your interactions around the church, to shoot them a call or an email or a text and just ask them what coaching was like.
Yeah.
And then there's an interest form on that website that people can fill out.
Tremendous. Okay, so listeners, I'll have links for both of those in the show notes, but hang with us here because both of these gentlemen that I've been interviewing today are actually offering the first private offering of our introductory course here right at the Professional Christian Coaching Institute in August of this year. Depending on when you're listening to this, August of 2026 will be the initial offering of the essentials of leadership coaching for leaders in the Orthodox Church. Now, again, that would be clergy leaders and lay leaders, anyone who is in a position of leadership and influence and looking to train in coaching, taking a coach approach to that leadership. That offering is this August in 2026, and Dave Limiero and Father Ian Pac-Urar will be co-teaching that along with Dr. Steve Cromer from our faculty here at the Institute. You can find all the information about that course at our website at professionalchristiancoaching.com/orthodox. professionalchristiancoaching.com/orthodox. There is, of course, a form there to fill out, and you can actually talk with one of our academic advisors. That way you're talking with a real person and get a lot more information about both of these organizations and that course offering this fall. If all goes as we're anticipating, that is just the first of many offerings for this private Orthodox course in leadership coaching. So God is clearly doing exciting things, and it's very exciting to see kind of the cusp of the wave building, as it were. Father Ian, anything that you want to leave us with today in reflecting back on this conversation about the emerging Orthodox coaching movement?
I'm just really in awe of how this has exploded in the last very few years. And If you had asked me 5 years ago whether coaching would catch on in the Orthodox Church, I would have said, well, maybe among a few people. But the kind of work that David's been doing over at Eden's View, the things that we're doing, the work that, we'd be remiss if we didn't hark back to an old friend of yours, Chris, Dean Harbury, who really kind of brought ICF coaching to the Orthodox Church. God has worked through so many of his servants, and the fields are white and the opportunities are many. And if you never ever become a professional coach, if you take this course and really internalize these skills, it will change your life and the lives of those around you.
Wow. Well said. And I would say that is not an oversell. That is absolutely true. In fact, that's one of the most frequent comments we get back from the students who take our courses. When we say students, they're generally like midlifers, 35 to 65, 75 is our average age of students here. And they will say, this has changed whatever my roles were in life, but I'm not sure I've done anything else in terms of personal development that has had more dramatic impact on the way I'm living and stewarding my life before God. Very, very powerful opportunity for self-examination, even as we train for application with other people. David, let me toss that same question to you. Anything you want to leave our listeners with as this emerging Orthodox coaching movement presents itself?
About half the folks we coach are Orthodox priests, clergy. The other half are small business owners, people of faith. And what I would say, I think every leader has a toolbox. And when you get to a point in life where you missing the right tool or you feel like you need one more tool, adding the tool of coaching to your leadership toolbox is really powerful. Um, there's just a whole new set of things which complements, again, I think as you said earlier, Chris, it doesn't replace other things, but it comes alongside all those things. And whether you're leading a business as an Orthodox layperson, or leading your family, or you're leading a parish, or you're a parish council president or parish council member, this is one more way of leading that is probably different than ways that you've learned to lead in other places. And the results are amazing. And it's a beautiful thing to watch as people discover, as Father Ian has said, once you've been through coaching, it's much easier to understand the value of it than it is maybe looking and having questions.
Yes, absolutely. I like that metaphor, the toolbox too. Gang, if this has excited you, be aware there is an emerging movement of coaching within the Orthodox Church. And I pray that if you've heard something stir in your spirit by the Holy Spirit, that you will take that next step. Pop out and visit us on the web at professionalchristiancoaching.com/orthodox. And again, in the show notes, there will be links to everything else. You can connect with either Father Ian or Dave Limiero. So much opportunity for you here. With that, we'll wrap up and say, as we always do here, you keep raising the standard of coaching and changing the world. God's richest blessings to you.